and say welcome, one and all. Welcome back to Explore Yorkshire. I never forget to do branding, which I should do. And and what do we do here? If you enjoy, in case you're joining us for the first time, although I suspect there isn't anybody just yet, stories, landscapes, kind of hidden gems, really all about Yorkshire. So just trying to acquaint you and show you the eyes through a Yorkshireman's eyes, as you might say. So you go with me, and hopefully you get to see and enjoy what we have to offer. So today our historic journey begins in the historic village of Thorpe Arch, a place with its kind of roots stretching all the way back to the Domesday Book and echoes of even older settlements beneath its fields. So it's just a spin you around right on the edge of the village, which is always nice to kind of start on the edge so you can get a sense that we are here in Running for. Hello, KCM from Nashville, all the way from Nashville, joining us in North Yorkshire. So roots in it mentioned the Domesday Book, echoes of older sentiments sort of beneath these fields, going all the way back to archaeology, and we're going to follow down the village road, past some elegant, really Georgian houses, and kind of centuries of quiet history. Then we're going to cross over the River Wharfe. It's a beautiful stone bridge down there that links Thorpe Arch to its neighbour, Boston Spa. And once we step over that bridge, the kind of character really shifts. Boston Spa kind of opens up with its grand kind of Regency architecture, Spa town heritage, and a kind of lively high street. So perfect contrast to the first part of this, which is kind of peaceful charm of Thorpe Arch. So join me as we walk from one village to the next, tracing a route shaped by the Romans, the Normans, Georgian estate builders, and of course the river that ties them together. So this is Thorpe Arch, lovely estate house on the end here. Estate properties, by the way, obviously, just to be sort of clear what we're kind of talking about, is houses that were kind of built to be part of a estate, usually with a big house, the Thorpe Arch Hall. We're not going to see that today because A, it's private, and B, it's a bit of a kind of trek it over in the opposite direction to where we're going. But you've got kind of an estate house is houses that were built to be part of that estate, lived in by estate workers, people employed, sort of help manage the estate and whatever, and obviously different grades of housing to kind of indicate your kind of your social rank and importance to the estate. And this very much looks to me to be a kind of gatehouse type property. So as I say, we're in Thorpe Arch, a village just over the river from Boston Spa, whose story stretches back nearly 1,000 years, and even further, really, if you count the ancient footprints beneath our feet. And they're lovely, the first Domesday Book of 1086. So what we might kind of lump together and call a kind of Stone Age period, people were here, living here, and a couple of the really brigantes, and something kind of splintering into a million little kind of rebellions. So that's why they were here, to kind of put in law and order. But what they really want to line against the tribes of the north. But of course the river itself has other ideas. Mists rising from the water at dawn, of sudden whirlpools forming into calm stretches, of an eerie feeling that someone or something was watching from beneath the surface. Forming into calm stretches, of an eerie feeling that someone or something was watching from beneath the surface. I'm good. One centurion, Marcus Aelius Varro, recorded in his journal, "The river is alive, it listens, it judges." And he was not the only one that thought so. To appease the goddess, so hopefully we'll be back. It's not nice for it, is it always, John? Sorry, I'm just trying to follow. If the signal buffered, don't worry. As I say, we'll just have a laggy bit. I said at the beginning we would be a laggy bit, and we'll walk through, and then it should be fine for us to talk. So I don't know, am I on now? Please don't buffer, I'm battered enough. I'll just walk on a little bit, and we will hopefully let me know when I am back in range. We'll pick that bit up again. So do let me know, is that buffering stopped now? Am I coming through? Because I think that from this point onwards the signal should be fine. So I'm just going to stop here, and hopefully I'll catch up. So if somebody could let me know if we're back. And good, yeah. I thought it was a bit of a slow. So I'm not quite sure kind of where I cut out there, but basically what I was talking about, yeah, I should be all right now. Is that early bit on the edge of the village? I just wanted to kind of get that into the establishing shot. So basically what I was talking about there was The Romans had kind of built a fortress, a wooden fortress at Newton Kyme. The idea was to kind of hold the river crossing to defend against the kind of challenge from these kind of northern tribes. But they had to kind of fight against the River Wharfe, which we're going to be crossing in just a few minutes. And I'm just going to stay here for a minute and we'll sort of catch up. Isn't it lovely, by the way, the sunlight on the stone, on this limestone? Same stone, of course, in York, magnesium limestone, quarried in Tadcaster, or Calcarea, as it was known in the Roman era. So let me tell you about what the Romans had to say about the river. They wrote of strange mists rising from the water at dawn, of sudden whirlpools forming in calm stretches, of an eerie feeling that someone or something was watching them from beneath the surface. So one centurion, Marcus Aelius Varro, recorded in his journal, "The river is alive, it listens, it judges." And he was not the only one that thought so. So to appease the goddess, the Romans erected an altar, a carved stone dedicated to Dea Verbea, the spirit of the wharf. So as far as the Romans were concerned, the river was host to a female goddess. So offerings were made before every patrol: coins, bread, wine, and even small bronze figurines. And of course, these have been found through archaeological digs, in the riverbeds and so forth. So the altar stood near the ford where the river narrowed, close to the modern bridge between Boston Spa and Thorpe Arch, where we're going to be crossing in just a few minutes. So locals still say that on quiet mornings, when the mist clings low to the water, you can feel the weight of those ancient prayers lingering in the air. The real altar, by the way, was discovered centuries later up near sort of Bolton Abbey way, things like that way. And it shows the goddess Verbea with flowing hair and twin serpents, a kind of reminder that the Romans saw the wharf as both a life giver and a life destroyer. So I'll just try and find a picture of the, here it is. That's what was found, again, near the river. So they, as I say, the sort of personification, I suppose is what you'd call it, wouldn't you? The goddess Verbea was in the wharf, and she basically, had her own mind, her own attitudes, and they had to kind of work with her rather than try and impose their will upon her. Thank you, I think that's very kind. So yeah, I'll just get rid of that for you, and we'll kind of continue. It's interesting, isn't it? So imagine a river, and of course this goes back, it's not just a kind of Roman thing. We think of the Romans as being more advanced, but in many respects, of course, they were just reflecting people of the era. The Egyptians, of course, believed that the Nile, was a god, wasn't it? And not least because it would flood twice a year, create this wonderful kind of fertile mud banks, and then that allowed wonderful things to grow. So this idea, of a river being a living being that could impact and control destinies, life and death through harvests, was a very, very well established. So the Romans might be a lot better at engineering, but it would be a mistake to think of them as being not superstitious, because they absolutely were. So that altar was carved of this characteristic limestone. Again, we're just passing a beautiful, and compared to what's going to come, these are very modest, these properties. But this beautiful honeyed sort of yellow stone that you'll recognise from Clifford's Tower, from the Minster, from the walls in York, it's all the same stone that comes from very nearby. But as we kind of walk past these elegant Georgian terraces, you're seeing now the impact of the 18th century estate that shaped the village character. So in 1748, a chap called William Gossip, so there might be a tiny little dip while I come around this corner, but I promise you that should be it for the rest of the tour. In 1748, a chap called William Gossip acquired the lordships, so in other words, all the land around this area, and began developing Thorpe Arch into the picturesque place that we see today. The stonework, the symmetry, the sort of quiet dignity, the beautiful green colour, can I say, of these homes, they're kind of part of a vision that's lasted for centuries. And I think that for most of us, we are incredibly drawn to the kind of the rustic charm combined with kind of Georgian elegance. A village green, which of course is the kind of communal heartbeat of a village. It's a place to meet, to greet, to swap news and gossip, to trade, to buy, to sell. And so as you kind of come into the village green, this is obviously the repurposed, reorientated, redesigned village green built by William Gossip in the 18th century. But the actual site, of course, would have been the village green for kind of many years prior to that. Grazing animals, of course, on the green itself. So how cute is this? I don't know if Marlene is on or is joining us, but if you're looking to add to your property portfolio, you do a lot worse than come down this area. So isn't it pretty? Do let me know if you're enjoying the visual quality of this vision. Hopefully we're getting a nice sort of steady signal for you now. So yeah, gathering news, you know, all sorts of things. So this village changed kind of dramatically in the mid-1700s when this chap called William Gossip bought the estate, and he brought in John Carr, architect I've spoken about on many occasions, based in York, to build the big house, and you know, basically oversaw the development of this beautiful Georgian village. So as I say, we're still in Thorpe Arch. Boston Spa is still very much to come. That's just over the other side of the bridge. So all this kind of landscaping here would have been done in the middle part of the 18th century rather. As I say, he acquired the estate in 1748, and he probably found out what he paid. He pretty peanuts by comparison to prices these days. He wasn't local, by the way. He arrived here with money, kind of ambition, and a kind of clear vision of what he wanted this place to be. And I think he's executed it very, very well. I say the big hall is about sort of like 5 to 10 minutes walk sort of in that direction where we're kind of pointed now, but as I say, it's just a private house down a very long lane. But if you look up, it's actually for sale at the minute. Thorpe Arch Hall, and there are some fab images. So it's looking good, isn't it? It's looking lovely. So as I say, Gossip bought everything. He bought the land, he bought the farms, the cottages, and he set about reshaping Thorpe Arch into a refined Georgian estate village. So he brought in John Carr, as I say, to design the hall, and I think he did a pretty darn good job. So I think, you know, when we walk past these houses, the elegant stone houses with their kind of neat proportions, you can feel that Georgian influence. You can see, obviously, the symmetry within there, the nice clean lines, the simplicity, of course. This is kind of Gossip's legacy. A village deliberately crafted to look orderly, graceful, and modern for its time. So, of course, we look at it now and think, what a beautiful historic look. But, of course, when this was built, this was what modernity looked like. So it's always, I always find it very interesting thinking of ideas of modernity from the past, if that makes sense. Sci-fi is great for that, isn't it? You know, looking at, you know, what Star Trek and whatever you thought the future was going to look like, Space 1999, all that sort of stuff. It can look sort of historic and dated now, but at the time, it was futuristic. So when you look at this, don't necessarily think bucolic and pastoral. Also think this was futuristic. This was, you know, changing and creating uniformity into a rural landscape that up until then had been characterised by kind of higgledy-piggledy cottages, you know, and everything kind of being different. So let me cross over, try not to get run over. Yeah, we're near Wetherby, that's right, Catherine. So Wetherby's about 2-3 miles. So again, this stone wall here might just cause a little dip, but as soon as we get to the river, we should be fine. So from the village green, then the road leads us gently down towards the River Wharf, which we're heading now. And this route has been used for centuries, long before these Georgian terraces appeared. And just ahead of us is the beautiful stone bridge that links Thorpe Arch into Boston Spa. So they say the River Wharf is older than memory. I love that. Long before maps, before bridges, before the first stone cottage rose on the banks of the Boston Spa, the river carved its way through the limestone like a living blade. The Celts believed it was the boundary between worlds, a place where spirits travelled as easily as fish. The Romans, as I say, more practical but no less superstitious, called it Verbea, after a river goddess they feared as much as they revered. Let me just turn around here, you can see this exposed limestone here in the walls. I come here once before, about 3 years ago. So yeah, maybe at the tail end of Hago. I can't remember whether it's Hago or it was Solo, but it's about 3 years. I've only done it once. So when the Romans marched north, they followed the wharf like a guide. So they basically followed the path of the river. And at a place called Newton Kine, just downstream, as I say, they built a fort whose stones still sleep beneath the fields. And these soldiers came from far-off provinces, from Gaul, modern-day France, Hispania, Spain, Thrace, and they crossed the river with timber bridges and whispered prayers to Verbea before battle. Now, some claim that Verbea, the river goddess, answered them. One legionary wrote on a night when the river rose without rain, swirling with pale shapes that moved against the current, which crossover. And the next morning, a scouting party returned with news of an ambush that had been avoided. And the soldiers then left offerings after that, coins, brooches, and even the carved altar I showed you, which was found centuries later. You see, the wharf remembers. So the bridge at Boston Spar and Thorpe Arch stands where the river narrows, but also deepens, a place long considered to be sacred. Before the stone arches, there was a wooden crossing. Before that, there was a ford. And before that, only the river, cold and commanding. Local legend tells of a Roman engineer who tried to build the first bridge here. Each morning, he returned to find his work undone. Stones scattered, timbers snapped, footprints of something large pressed into the mud. And on the seventh night, he kept watch. And what he saw was never written down. But the next day, he moved the bridge site a few yards upstream, and the construction went on smoothly from that point onwards. The villagers say he had learned to respect the river's will. So even now, when the wharf floods, the arches tremble under the weight of roaring water, and people say it's Verbea reminding the village that the bridge only stands with her permission. Now, of course, if that seems a bit far-fetched when we're stood here on a stone bridge to say it's really down to the river whether it stands or not, I'd like to remind you of something that I showed you. We did a tour in Tadcaster a couple of years ago, and this is an incredible piece of live video that was shot less than 5 miles away from here on the 29th of December in 2015. So hopefully we've got the bandwidth to play this. So this is another bridge, another stone bridge like this across the river wharf, and many will say that this is Verbea, the river goddess, deciding the bridge was no longer welcome. I promise it's genuine, it's not AI. So that from the Guardian newspaper. So that is the river wharf, or some would have it, Verbea basically imposing her will. So I do hope that came through and you're able to see that. So Boston Spa then grew up from the springs that were said to have healing powers. But older stories claim the waters were blessed or cursed by the river goddess herself. Some believed her springs were her tears, shed when the Romans left and the land fell silent. It was flood. It was caused by flood washing away the what was underpinning the bridge, and so when that happens over time, eventually it collapses. So it's the river that did it. So yes, they believe that the Romans left, the land fell silent, and so the springs were the tears of the river coming back to the surface. Travellers in the 18th century wrote of strange sensations near the riverbank. Southern warmth in winter, a feeling of being watched, the sound of footsteps behind them when no one was there. And the locals shrug. It's just the wharf, they said, as though that explained everything. So across the water, Thorpe Arch, which is now behind us, grew from older soil. Its lanes follow the lines of forgotten fields, and its stones carry the mark of centuries. Farmers once claimed that the river spoke to them, not in words, but in signs. A sudden ripple meant rain. A still surface meant frost. A twisting current meant change. Now, during the Second World War, when a vast ordnance factory rose, for building weaponry in the Second World War, they built that nearby. The workers swore that the river grew darker as though absorbing the weight of what was being built. and some said they saw pale figures drifting along the water at night. Not ghosts, but memories. The wharf keeps them on. So crossing this bridge is like stepping from one chapter of history into another. So behind us is Gossip's Georgian estate villages. Ahead of us lies Boston Spa, with its Regency architecture, Spa-town heritage, two places shaped by different eras, connected by the river, and of course connected by this tour, by this walk, which I do hope you enjoy. And so I'm going to thank you, Percy, thank you very much. But it is a pain, it's an ode to the river that is shaped so much of this landscape and, to this day, obviously, what it's like to live here. But of course, we talk about the springs next to the spa. But isn't this beautiful? But thank you, I'm glad that you like what I've been writing. I'm afraid I'm writing more and more notes, which is why I'm able to get more poetic. I'm getting older and older, and my memory's not as good as it used to be, so I'm relying more on notes. But the nice thing about relying on notes is you can script more of it, so less spontaneous, perhaps in some respects, although we can always stop and chat and respond to the chat, but their brain isn't as sharp as it kind of used to be. So, but it is nice. I can spend time crafting sentences rather than be talking about stuff that's in front of me, which is nice. So as we leave kind of Thorpe Arch behind, we'll cross the bridge into Boston Spa now. We're stepping into a village whose entire identity was shaped by a single moment of discovery, a moment that turned a quiet riverside settlement into one of Yorkshire's fashionable spa destinations. And the story begins in the early 1700s, when a local man named John Shires was digging near the riverbank, just where we've been. And what he uncovered wasn't treasure in the usual sense, not gold or coins, but something far more valuable for the age he lived in. He found a spring bubbling up from deep underground, rich in minerals with a sharp, kind of salty tang. This was magnesium sulfate, or as the people soon called it, the Boston Spa water. At the time, Britain was obsessed with healing powers of mineral springs. Places like Harrogate and Bath were booming, drawing aristocrats, physicians, and fashionable society. So when word spread that a new spring had been found on the banks of the wharf, people came to investigate. Doctors analysed the water and declared it a powerful purgative, capable of cleansing the body and curing all manner of ailments, from digestive troubles to skin complaints. And whether it worked or not hardly mattered. In the Georgian imagination, mineral water was magic. 18th century health tourism did not develop straight away. Boston wasn't that well connected on what was still a primitive road. In 1753, however, that change came when a new turnpike road from Otley to Tadcaster enabled better access to the village, and coach services from York, Leeds and Harrogate began to stop here. So the hotel we're looking at now opened, allowing visitors to stay overnight. Farrer's later became the Royal Hotel. It's now a Costco store, probably one of the nicest convenience stores you probably wish to go into. And it's the oldest of the commercial buildings in Boston Spa. So this is the beginnings, if you like, of that kind of transformation from being a kind of small village to a place that is now a destination. You've got coaches that are stopping here, and so consequently you're starting to get the apparatus, if you like, to kind of host that. So in Georgian England, the discovery of sulphuric spring could make a town's fortunes. If you find mineral waters with supposed healing properties nearby, and a remarkable rural village could rapidly develop into a spa town with elegant buildings. And this is what we're about to see. So wide promenades and a kind of fashionable clientele. So some of these spa towns managed to sustain their prosperity to the present day and have identities that remain defined by their past as health retreats, such as Harrogate or Ilkley. Others, like Boston Spa, are kind of forgotten spa towns, whose baths closed prematurely, whose functions were superseded. And one of these was Boston Spa, a village near Wetherby that rode the spa town boom, but today only offers clues of its heyday. So the evidence of a legacy of wealth is all around us. Wealthy merchants and the gentry start to move to Boston, and from the 1770s, several grand houses were built, all of which still stand today. So Boston Spa contains over 50 listed buildings of national significance. And as lovely as all of these have been, we're about to see, or at least only see a glimpse of, the first one. And this is a property called St Kitts, the oldest of the grand houses, which dates back to 1774. It was built by a chap called Reverend Christopher Atkinson for his daughters, and the family remained there until 1860. The Pines, and this is the kind of the wall, the property perimeter now of the Pines, is one of the most distinguished Regency era residences. Kind of large, elegant, give you a sense of it, set back from the road behind mature trees. It was exactly the sort of home chosen by people of standing during the spa boom. So here's St Kitts. So doctors, clergy, retired military officers, and those with kind of means, so I'll just give you a little bit of zoom there, we don't invade their privacy, but you know, those with the kind of means to enjoy the village's genteel lifestyle. So Reverend Atkinson was very much one of them. And living at the Pines placed him right at the heart of Boston Spa's kind of social world. In the 1800s, clergy were not just religious figures. They were kind of community figures, leaders, educators, and often the most kind of literate and, so just bringing that in, so you have a look. The most obviously literate and educated in the village. So they're very influential. So there's the plaque. There's a plaque of these around. So have I come off full zoom? I think we may have done. Okay. So Boston Spa is a village, civil parish. It's part of Leeds in West Yorkshire. It's about 3 miles south of Wetherby. And Boston Spa is on the south bank of the River Wharfe, which we've passed. And today it's a thriving village. Takes full advantage of its kind of prestigious location between York, Leeds and Wetherby. Numerous bars, cafes, fantastic resale offer, making it one of the most desirable housing locations in the north. And the fact that it's another one of these very big houses down the drive here. The fact that up at Thorpe Arch, just behind it on the trading estate, Leeds United, a big Premier League football club here, they've got their training ground, so lots of footballers buy properties here. Famously, Geoffrey Boycott, I'll show you his former house. You may have heard of him. A very prominent former English cricketer, lived here. So he's kind of associated with kind of celebrity, a bit like Yorkshire's Alderley Edge in Cheshire, where the Manchester United players all sort of famously live and kind of congregate. So he's kind of got that vibe to it. It's a place that, you know, when you've made money, it's a stable block over here. This is the sort of place you'll come and buy into old Yorkshire money, stone houses, all that. But it's not just a story of wealth. Just sort of passing the village hall here. I want to take you around to see the Methodist chapel. It's lovely. So in the 18th century, which saw Boston Spa develop from an agricultural settlement into a fashion resort, also saw lovely war memorial here, by the way. Also saw the emergence of Methodism as a kind of revitalising force in England Protestantism. I think, Laurie, that's very likely. A lot of the clergy, as you point out, you know, were born from wealthy families. Those that weren't inheriting will possibly join the military or the church. So they were sort of places where you could end up as completely kind of respectable. So, and of course, if you then end up as a bishop or go further, then you can just have a very high standard of living indeed. But on the opposite end of the scale, you've got the Methodists, who grow largely out of the agricultural and the working class poor. So the movement sort of begins as a kind of campaign for reform within the Church of England, but eventually kind of breaks away from it. So it starts within the Church of England, but breaks away. Initially, it was a kind of movement for all, but over time, it became associated really with the poor and the labouring classes. And in the early 1800s, when Boston Spa was kind of buzzing, is it down here? Yeah, here we are. Yeah. When Boston Spa was kind of buzzing, with visitors coming in to drink the waters, Methodist preachers were already holding meetings in houses and rented rooms. What they didn't have at that time was a kind of permanent home. The movement grew quickly, drawing in sort of both locals and spa guests who were looking for something more personal than the traditional parish church. And actually, the church here isn't actually that central. It's on the edge of the village. So again, that may have kind of played into its strength, that it was very closely located to the spa. So the first chapel was built here in the early in the century, but this one was built in the 1870s, and it is an absolute stunning example of a congregational building, of Methodist building. It is absolutely great. And the congregation by the 1870s clearly needed somewhere bigger and more permanent, and the result was this handsome Victorian church. So right now the trees are in such greenery, they're kind of blocking it. So let me kind of come around here, and you'll see now, usually they can be sort of fairly plain and austere, Methodist chapels, but this one is an absolute beauty. It really is. Look at that, isn't that fab? Never heard of Cheshire? Really? Okay. It's kind of the south of Manchester and sort of south-west, I guess, of Liverpool, south-east Liverpool, that way. But it's very wealthy, called it the stockbroker belt. So this kind of gives us a sense that Methodism had kind of become part of the fabric of Boston Spa. You know, you don't build buildings of this quality and this sort of magnitude without, you know, it's a demonstration that Methodism was kind of very, very well established, and kind of even, you know, as the kind of the spa trade faded, the church remains a centre of community life, offering music, meetings, and kind of support for the village. And I remind you that Boston Spa wasn't just a place of physical healing, but for spiritual life as well. So let's see, should we go out the way we came? I think it might be easier. Isn't it lovely? I do hope you enjoy it. It's a really beautiful, hello fan. It's really beautiful and lovely, characterful graveyard as well. Now you guys, should we have a look at a couple of graves while we're here? Let's look at some of the dates. So 1871, so that's very much kind of tying in with the time this was built in the 1870s. Let's see. Oh, much more recent, 1978, that one. Although, of course, that's now getting on 50 years ago, isn't it? Which is kind of, frankly, quite scary. So the church doesn't sit on the high street, which is kind of interesting, which is kind of typical insofar as they don't tend to have the prime locations that you'd then find for the Protestant churches. Cheshire Cats, absolutely. 1867. So if you're into Cheshire Cats, do check out my tour last week of Ripon if you haven't already done. I talk about Cheshire Cats, but I'll not spoil the secret as to why I talk about Cheshire Cats. You'll have to watch it and find out. So this one is from 1877. So again, they are very much of the period when this was built. So let's walk on, because there's plenty more that I would like to see. Hopefully you're all enjoying the ride. So we're going back to the main street and look at some more of the buildings. So yeah, so the Methodist kind of it sits sort of alongside Anglicanism, but this would have been largely, as I say, for the rural workers, but also for working in the big houses. So bearing in mind, you know, when you're looking at the size and the scale of the properties here, clearly there would have been domestic staff doing all manner of jobs, from maids to cooks, people looking after horses, etc., and vehicles. So consequently, it would be very likely that whilst the lords and ladies and the sons and daughters of the house may well, you know, partake of their services at the Anglican church, the household staff much more likely to attend the service at the Methodist church. So just class differential. But isn't that something? Isn't that something? So let's just walk on. By the way, we sort of passed there sort of quickly, but the War Memorial, by the way, 32 people are commemorated on there. So let's come over onto this side. So this is kind of one of the most prime properties in the village. This is Boston Hall, the former home of the self-styled Sir Geoffrey Boycott. Doesn't live here anymore. He's moved on. But his infamy is still part of it. He redevelops this property and spent a great deal of money in it. But it's Boston Hall, so it's the main part of the house was completed in 1807. Although there's kind of subsequent later additions. House Grade 2 listed. It was used for offices in many years, but in 2013 planning was sought to return it to a residential unit, and it's a mere 11 bedrooms. As I say, the former England cricket captain and Yorkshire cricketer Geoffrey Boycott bought it in 2019, but he's since sold up. But here's the sign for it: neoclassical style. And neoclassical, in case you're not kind of aware, basically it means new classical. In other words, you're going back to the classical style. So the Greek, the Roman, so you get columns and straight lines and porticos, all this kind of stuff. You look above the door there, so you'll see, you know, it is basically, it's referencing classical attitudes, so new classical. So if you guys ever hear neo, and you've ever thought, what does that actually mean, neo? It means a kind of new, it's a revival of a kind of classical style. But I don't really think that the stags are particularly classified. That's Geoffrey's own interpretation of that. But there we go. So also, and these are absolutely glorious on this side as well, aren't they? On the high street, just kind of coming up into view now, you've got three really elegant Georgian properties known as Langton House, Shelley House and Brantwood, and they're known collectively as Wesley Terrace. Named, of course, after John Wesley, the founder of Methodism. And it's a reminder that Boston Spa wasn't just a fashionable spa village, it was also a strong Methodist community. These elegant stone houses were home to respectable families, professionals, and of course visiting spa guests, and they sit right in the heart of the village life. And one of the key figures of the community was Reverend Briggs, a Methodist minister who served here in the 19th century. And ministers like Briggs weren't just preachers, they were community leaders, educators and organisers, bringing people together, ensuring that children of less well-off families, were to receive education. The best way up and out, of poverty, at least it was until very recently, was education. So there's a big focus on literacy, on learning, on improvement, on betterment, and of course a suppression of the drinking and gambling and vice and the things that might kind of cause people to, men particularly, should put it that way, and women with loose morals, all that sort of stuff. So it's very much about improvement, about betterness, about kind of everything being focused on. We're born here, but how can we aspire to be better, both in the eyes of God, but also in terms of how we can contribute to the betterment of society. So it's an age that is sort of firmly split between, scientific advances, but also still a strict moral, religious Protestant kind of code, whether it be Methodist or Anglican, it doesn't much matter. It's still that idea, do you know what I mean, that hard work, do you know what I mean, is the way that we build a better society and that we kind of build ourselves up. So, what was fantastic about the work that people like Briggs did is that even then, when the kind of spa boom was kind of falling away, the foundations that he built meant that that there was still a living, vibrant kind of community. Does that kind of make sense? So again, typical Georgian feature, the bowed windows. That was a new thing, of course, for letting in more light. So let's cross over and we'll have a look at Wellesley Terrace over there without trying to invade people's privacy, but. So bowed window, very much a Georgian thing, and really what we're talking about, is the carpenters are responding to the fact that glass can be made more precise, made to uniform thickness. It can be made in wider, bigger panes, without cracking and breaking. So you've kind of got a mix of sort of carpentry and glazing. There's a lovely magnolia tree over here, isn't it lovely to see the magnolia in full blossom? So even when the sort of spa trade was kind of on its way out, it had established itself, as a permanent well-to-do residence. So when you're looking at these terraces, you're sort of seeing the world that Reverend Briggs helped to nurture, a kind of confident, close-knit Methodist community right here on the high street. They are beautifully maintained. I mean, it is, as I say, it's a wealthy enclave, not going to lie. Manor Ash, another one just behind us here. There's so many here. Another George property dates from 1790, built for church warden John Thomas. No giggling in the back row. And it was the post office here for many years, when the mail came by horse and cart from nearby Tadcaster. So we've got the site just down here, just coming into view now, the former kind of coaching inn. So long before the development of the kind of roadside motel, travellers had to use different methods to get adequate rest. So travellers and their horses used coaching inns to get food, alcohol and rest. Initially only the wealthy could travel, but suddenly in 1667 everything changed. In 1667 the flying machine appeared in the UK and heralded the beginning of public transport. Coachers had been braving England's roads since at least 1500, and innkeepers who offered food, shelter and fresh horses to the wealthy already enjoyed a lively trade. So we talk about, the problems for English pubs. That's really when they sort of started to boom, was the beginnings of the coach era, really kind of put turbocharge underneath the English pubs. And sadly, for many, that seems to be running out of kind of momentum now. But that was kind of what drove pubs and inns in the first place was their locations on staging. And stage coaches, quite literally, how far the horses can travel before you need to change the horses. So you might get the passengers, they come off for a short break or an overnight stay for food and whatever it can look like. That was the industry. And if we look across on the architecture of Hudson Mews across of us, you can see, thank you, Holly, we can see the a building that's purpose built for coaches. I might just stay on this side, it might be slightly easier, just to give you and then we'll cross over. So by the mid 18th century, England was kind of crisscrossed with coach routes and hundreds of inns that were spread out about 7 to 10 mile stages across the land. So the coach stops at the end of each stage and changes the horses, allow passengers to refresh themselves. Think how many horses you would need when there's all these coaches going, and each time they need to chop and change every 7 to 10 miles of going 200 miles to London. You just start to think about actually how many sets of horses and so how many people were employed looking after the horses. So this is where the name stagecoach comes from, and the Great North Road was crucial to the history of coaching inns. So along this road that links London, York and Edinburgh, coaching inns provided refreshment, lodgings and fresh horses for weary travellers. So today all that remains really the coaching inn is what we can see here, Hudson Mews. The former stables and carriage house where the ostlers would have tended the horses. So ostlers were employed to look after horses, and the name derived, I don't know if Leslie's on, Leslie Ram, from London. The name derived from London coaching inns, where the custom of dropping the letter H meant the hostelers, those who worked in hostels, the hostels were known as ostlers. So if you ever wondered where the name ostler comes from, it is the London dropped H famously, and that's where it comes from. So ostler is a hosteler, somebody who works in a hostel. So the neighbouring pub to here, which sadly is closed right now, commemorates a very lesser known English figure, but a chap called Edward Hawke, 1st Baron Hawke, who was born in 1705. He lived nearby in Tadcaster. He was a navy officer. He took part in the Battle of Toulon in 1741. Thank you, friend. He captured 6 French ships in the Bay of Biscay in 1747. He achieved victory in the French fleet at the Battle of Quiberon Bay in the 7 Years' War, thus preventing the French invasion of Britain. And he was an MP in the House of Commons from the mid-part, I think, 1747 to 1776. Thank you, Fran. First Lord of Admiralty for 5 years. But where he's kind of really left an interesting dent in our history is in 1768, Hawke appointed Captain James Cook to lead a naval expedition in the Pacific. And the mission was officially to map the region. But on his arrival in Tahiti, Captain Cook opened secret orders from Admiral Hawke to seek out Terra Australis. So in other words, Australia. But Captain Cook didn't notice he got to Tahiti. That was the real purpose of the mission. And interestingly, for those that have to be on in the US, there was a growing sense among the British government that American independence was on its way and we were going to lose our penal colony. So we decided we needed somewhere else to send our prisoners. We were sent off to look out for the mythical Terra Australis, the Australian land, and Captain Cook was given that job by Admiral Hawke. So Baron Hawke died in 1781, but he still has places named after him in New South Wales, Cape Hawke, in New Zealand, North Island's Hawke Bay, and in Canada, Port Hawkesbury in Nova Scotia. I don't know if Fran, you've heard of Port Hawkesbury, and Hawke's Bay in Newfoundland, all named after Captain Hawke. So, Admiral Hawke. So there he is. Sadly, this pub is shut at the moment. Hopefully, by the next time I come, but more importantly, when you come, it'll have reopened. But right now, it is shut. So let's, tell you what, we're going to look at the hotel. So, Boston Spar's kind of development really accelerates in 1784. The waters were submitted for testing that we should cross over. And the experts of the day deemed the waters to have therapeutic qualities, and that kind of influx of well-heeled visitors looking to bathe in the revitalising springs could begin. So to attract wealthy visitors, the village needed somewhere respectable for them to stay. So in the mid-18th century, Boston Spar's first major hotel was built. A tall, elegant Georgian lodging house that stood proudly on what was to become the High Street. So this is the hotel they built. It offered comfortable rooms, dining, reading spaces, and a social for visitors who came, of course, to take the waters. The hotel, though, was more than just a building. It was a spark that kind of ignited the village's transformation. Because once the hotel opened, other businesses followed. Inns expanded, shops appeared, and the lodging houses sprang up because, of course, you've got leisure, haven't you? If you've got their people there taking the water a couple of times a day, what are they doing for the rest of the day? They've got a lot of time to spend and they've got a lot of money to spend, so consequently, businesses pop up to service the need. It's as old as the hills, okay? So this is how places come up, is because there are people with money to spend. So Fransby to Hawkesbury, well, there you go now. So if you ever go again, you can talk knowledgeably about Admiral Hawke. And his links to Boston Spa, Tadcaster, to Whitby, to Captain Cook, and to Yorkshire history. So this was an impetus, a spur for other businesses to kind of open up, and and carriages kind of would rattle along this turnpike road from York and Leeds, bringing visitors eager to sample the new spa. So the high street begins to take shape, and this kind of long, straight lined with refined stone houses designed to appeal to genteel society. So I'm just going to have a quick drink and then we'll head down to the waterside and have a look where the spa was. It really is an attractive place, is it not? So by the early 1800s, Boston Spa had become a fashionable kind of resort. The high street was its stage, elegant terraces, bow-fronted windows, and a tall Georgian and kind of Regency facades that still define the village today. Even after the spa craze faded, the architecture, of course, remained, giving Boston Spa its distinctive character. So as we walk up the high street now, I'm sure I've got some zoom on, I'm trying to get rid of it, but it just doesn't want to play, because it just feels to me that sometimes it's just pretty awkward. Maybe I haven't. Anyway, it's nice, isn't it, the light, yeah. So as we walk up the high street now, I want you to try and imagine the scene. So 2 centuries ago, visitors strolling in fine clothes, doctors offering advice, carriages waiting outside the hotel, and the sound of conversation drifting from the pump room. And all of it began with that discovery by John Shires and the hotel that rose to welcome the world. So we're now going to follow the route down to the spa, and the route the bathers, of course, would have taken to visit the spa. Now, of course, some would have walked, those with deeper pockets or more genteel constitutions would probably have been carried by carriage, but nonetheless, they've all come to the same place. It's not far, so we're just walking back past that Magnolia to down by the river now, the spa. So when we turn into Spa Lane, we're sort of following one of the most historic paths in Boston Spa, a route that took thousands of visitors, where they appeared in search of health, healing, and of course a little bit of Georgian glamour. And the lane, which will come up in a minute, is very, very quiet today, but again, if you imagine the 18th and early 19th centuries, it would have been bustling, it would have been alive with kind of people. So again, think of it as, a resort. This is the real kind of popular place to be, a des res. So it would have been noisy, bustling, a lot of people. And these houses down here built about 1810, 1820, and again of a kind of lower standard. But again, as the estate builds and it kind of grows, so the needs for the service industry, for servants, for cooks, for livery people, looking after vehicles and horses and all these. So of course you've got to accommodate those. So whenever you're seeing the smaller cottages kind of coming up, it's inevitably a sign of, as the demand for services and support grows, then consequently, they're pretty. Let's let these guys go past. No harm, it's just pausing by the. So carriages would have kind of rattled down here, and as we now, the surface isn't great. Yeah, the blue's very popular, isn't it, for the doors? I agree. Oh, they're lovely though. This yellow stone, the beautiful flowers, the forsythia, is that what it's called? Again, more magnolia. So what a lovely composition that is. So you can imagine the carriages kind of rattling down here, ladies in bonnets, gentlemen in their kind of fine coats, strolling arm by arm. So you can see we're now the other side of the Methodist church. So we've been doing a bit of a loop around the village. It's not a very big village. It's just there's so much to show you that in doing it in a linear style would have kind of missed out on a whole bunch of stuff. So it's nice to do a couple of loops. So you imagine them running arm in arms here, the servants perhaps running along behind them, carrying towels, flasks, drinking vessels. Everyone heading, though, to the same place, the original Spa Baths. So this is Spa Lane. So this is, again, the side of the Methodist Chapel. And imagine the excitement of around. Look at this property here. It's a beauty, this one. This is the old manse. So again, this is manse is where the Anglican preacher would have lived. Not bad for a vicarage, is it? Very nice, like that. I'm sure we've got some zoom on here, but it doesn't seem to want to come off. So zoom it is. We'll just have to live with the zoom. Because the picture's good, don't mind. So yeah, you imagine kind of arriving here full of excitement, you know, the promise of healing waters, the fashionable society, the fresh air of the Wharf Valley. So this lane was the kind of threshold between everyday life and the world of the spa. So the spa was right in front of us, coming to now. It was built here by the wharf in 1834. So of course, before that they could take to the waters by actually going into the water itself. But then, with the genteel, well-heeled people wanting to spend money, you build more upmarket, right? So by 1834, they had hot and cold baths, a tea room, a pump room, and the building was part of the Gascoigne family's Parlington estate. And at this time, it was known as Thorpe Spa, named after the nearby village of Thorpe Arch. And it was the golden age of spa towns, and Boston Spa was a genteel retreat for those in delicate health. So around 50 bathers a day were using the spa by 1850, the year the village changed its name to Boston Spa. So spa fever intensified when another spring was found near the site of what is now Wharfdale Hall, and grand plans were announced for more baths, a hotel, assembly rooms and formal gardens. So the ambition was there to really explode this. All the kind of hallmarks of major spa resorts were planned. But then the spa boom bust. Soon afterwards, the new hotel never opened, the company that built it went bankrupt soon after, and it became a boys' school instead. So you can see either side of here. And if you're kind of wondering what are the kind of factors of it, think about the time. The 1850s, what was coming along? Well, suddenly you had the availability of mass transport through trains. And so trains began to define where people went for leisure. So why, if we're going to say why did Boston Spa fail at this stage, it's the lack of a rail link. The nearest station was at Thorpe Arch on the Harrogate to Church Fenton rural branch, which opened in 1847. So many large spa towns such as Harrogate had centrally located stations on main lines connecting them with cities, with York and with Leeds. Building a railway bridge over the wharf was just judged to be too expensive. So the trend of taking the waters had also evolved over time, and sea bathing was now coming into vogue. You know, the bathing machines and everything, going into the water with in a kind of like in like a wooden hut. You know, because the Victorian women were censorious, weren't they? You weren't allowed to show a flash of ankle or anything, so you'd have to get into the water. It's already up to your neck. So sea bathing was now taking over as being the new kind of way to kind of get health boosts and immunity and all these kind of things. So the railways played a kind of increasing role in accelerating the kind of pastime's popularity as small coastal villages then began to develop as the seaside resorts. So you see a transition from the spas resorts to the seaside resorts, and it's so much driven by the laying of train tracks and the emergent leisure industries, and of people becoming wealthier, and as people move from working on the land to working often in service or in factories, this idea of time off, paid holidays, all these elements sort of start to sort of come together quite quickly from the middle part of the 19th century onwards. So you start to get, even for people at fairly low social status, a concept of leisure. Interestingly, they often would build kind of quite short distance journeys, and at the end of them they would put parks and amusement parks and sort of stuff, so that for servants about only have a half day off, you could go on a date, you know, with your beau. And feel like you're going somewhere, going on a journey, but unlike in France, a journée, to spend all day, you could be there in 20 minutes, half an hour, and then have the rest of the afternoon to kind of spend. So they did this quite a lot around here, up at Guiseley, Harry Ramsden's, but at Belle Isle in Manchester. There are quite a lot of places where these kind of short train lines would take you then to a destination where you can spend the afternoon with your sweetheart. So there we go. The railways buggered it up really for Boston Spa is a long way of what I'm saying. So Harrogate was always a premier spa destination, and it just about managed to kind of hang on because of its location, plus the Valley Gardens, and Ilkley as well was popular with its kind of wide streets of promenading and the dramatic setting of white wells on the spring moorland above the towns. We'll go back to Ilkley this year, but never quite for Boston Spa. So the village recovered and went on to thrive. It became a dormitory location for those commuting to Leeds, and the population steadily increased. And in 2019, I think it was the Sunday Times, said, this is kind of one of the places to live. And, when they kind of do that, best places to live in Britain, and York tends to do quite well in them. But from time to time, they do places that are a bit smaller, a bit less well known. And so Boston Spa, house prices shot up, and everybody wants to come down here. And of course, it's the 2019, the beginning of the influencer culture and this sort of stuff. People like me coming on, sticking cameras and doing stuff. So consequently, it got a lot of attention and got a lot of love. And so you got younger buyers now moving from, the demographic from being kind of like older, sort of settled, affluent pensioners. Suddenly you've got, kind of family-friendly atmosphere in here. Village attracting now kind of younger buyers, a reinvigorated high street, so kind of coffee culture, independent shops, bars, restaurants, all that kind of stuff sort of comes together. So a kind of happy combination, do you know what I mean, of obviously the honey-hued properties, beautiful spacious places, lots of outdoors, but critically really nearby, so you can commute or do your business dead easy in York and Leeds and Manchester. So which kind of fencing? This chain fencing down here. Is that what you mean? I don't know. So kind of Boston Spa in its kind of modern setting is kind of a great success story. But it's fairly new. It's not mentioned in the Doomsday Book, Thorpe Arches. So he suggests there was nothing here at that kind of period in time. It's like the area would have been farmed, if not settled though, possibly forming part of Thorpe Arch. So Thorpe Arch, thank you, Shell. It's obviously junior neighbour, as you might say, but initially it probably would have been the senior partner. And the fact that this was once known as Thorpe Spa sort of seems to underline this, doesn't it? Going sort of further back, we're not aware of any developments on this site, but it's only 5 miles from Tadcaster, a town founded in the Roman era. And in Roman times, Calcaria, as Tadcaster was then known, was a major road junction. So Tadcaster lies on the road called Ermine Street, spelled E-R-M-I-N-E, and the Roman road from London to York. So York being the second city, so being a stop-off, on the main route between the first city and the second city is a big deal, right? So location, as they say. So Calcaria comes from the word from lime kilns, reflecting the importance of the magnesium limestone geology as a natural resource for quarrying. And you see the big houses as well. If we sort of pan across this side, you'll see that they've all got these wonderful gardens that kind of terrace down. Tadcaster's beer, absolutely, Susan. Tadcaster in Burton-on-Trent, famous in this country for their very soft water. The water runs across limestone aquifers and gives a very, very soft water, which is very, very good for beer brewing. So we don't know exactly what was kind of here in kind of years gone by, but it's possible it started as an imperial staging post because its location at the river crossing on the road from Dagenham, Doncaster, to York, Ebrarcombe. So just 3 miles from Boston Spa, there's a Roman fort at Newton Kine, which I mentioned before. There's evidence of extensive Roman settlement in this area, and there's a hoard of Roman coins found in Boston Spa in 1848 during the constructions of the foundations for a new building. Thank you, Deirdre. So the Boston Spa hoard comprised of ceramic greyware, jar, and 172 silver denarii, and the coins date from 211 BC in the reign of Emperor Hadrian, or to the reign of Emperor Hadrian. It's about a 300-year period kind of covered. So it does suggest there was extensive Roman settlement in this period over a long period of time, at least 200 to 300 years. And it's likely that they've been deposited there in the 2nd century. And of course, hoards, when these you found, obviously together, it may be that somebody was escaping, fleeing, hiding money. Maybe their tax bill was coming in, they want to pay it. So they were hiding their wealth, either from raiders or from the legal form of raiders, the taxman. It's down in the Yorkshire Museum in York. So we're coming back up to the bridge which we crossed, but it's nice to see this from the other side. So the Stone Arch Bridge opened in 1770 across the wharf, linking the West Yorkshire villages of Boston Spa on the south bank and Thorpe Arch on the north. So the bridge has 5 arch spans coming into view now. And like everything else, it's built of this ashlar magnesium limestone. So the stone that you see in York, the walls, the churches, the minster, Clifford's Tower, you name it, it's all the same stone. It's the same stone here, comes from Tadcaster, just a few miles away from here. So the bridge was built to replace a ford. So a ford, basically, you may be aware, is a kind of shallow point where you can cross the river. So initially a ford was a place where you could cross with horses and with a wagon. So they were much prized. You know, if you were obviously, you know, a Roman general and you needed to move supplies, munitions, men, goods and so forth, you know, across a river, finding a place, a ford, where you could do that safely, where the river's fairly shallow, it's not moving too fast, you haven't got horrible currents to deal with, the weather's kind of on your side, they were much prized. So once you found these places, you built your fortresses there, you guarded them, because the last thing you wanted was for that to fall into the arms of your enemy, whereby they could then cut off your supply chains. So I mean, still the same to this day, you know, military still runs on the same thing, you know, wherever, you know, you've got ground troops going in, you need to ensure they can be supplied with ammunition, with equipment, with food, with drink, etc. So river crossings of ford are incredibly important. So the bridge was built obviously to replace the ford and connect the village with the turnpike road, which went then through Boston Spa. But the Wharfe, it has to be said, is not a gentle river. It has moods, tempers, and long memory. It's taken lives, but it's also saved them. It's carried armies, secrets, and stories. And as we finish our walk and our time together, it's worth remembering that the story of this place didn't begin with the Spa, or the Georgian terraces, or even the medieval villages. It began with the River Wharfe, a river the Romans believed was watched over by spirits, a river they treated with a mixture of respect and caution. They built roads and forts nearby, but they never underestimated the Wharfe's power. In their myths, this river had a life and a will of its own. And centuries later, it was the Wharfe again that shaped the destiny of this landscape. Its banks hid the mineral spring that transformed a quiet hamlet into Boston Spa, drawing visitors from across the country in search of healing. The river valley gave the village its clean air, its beauty, and its reputation as a place of renewal. Spa Lane, the High Street, the grand houses, all of them grew from that moment when the waters revealed their secret. And even today, the Wharfe continues to define life here. People walk its paths, cross its bridges. They settle in villages that still feel connected by the flow of the river. It's the backdrop to daily life, the thread that links Thorpe Arch and Boston Spa past to present, myth to modernity. The Romans saw the river with a spirit. The Georgians saw a river with healing power. We see that the river that carries the whole story of this place's history, its identity, and its sense of belonging. The Wharfe has always been more than water. It's a lifeline that ties everything together. At Boston Spa and Thorpe Arch, it becomes something rare, a place where history and myth overlap, where Roman footsteps echo beneath Georgian stone, where the river goddess still stirs beneath the surface. Stand on its banks for long enough and you'll feel it. There's a moment just after sunset when the river becomes something else entirely. The surface smooths, the air cools, the world seems to hold its breath. Old fishermen say this is when Verbea walks the banks, checking the stones of the bridge, listening to the whispers of the current. And if you're quiet, you might hear a soft hum beneath the water, like a lullaby sung in a language that no one speaks anymore. Children in Boston Spa used to dare each other to stand up at this bridge at midnight and drop a pebble into the water. If it sank without a sound, the river was pleased. If it splashed, they ran home as fast as they could. Because the river is watching. The river is remembering. The river is alive. Thank you, everybody. I do hope you've enjoyed your time with me and with the River Wharfe in Thorpe Arch and Boston Spa. It's been an absolute pleasure to bring it to you. Thank you, everybody who's made a contribution. It is much, much valued. not least with the price of fuel these days, which I know we're all facing. So everyone can say goodbye because we are leaving now at the end of our time together. It's been an absolute blast. I've loved having you with it, bringing you with it. And I look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Same time, different place. Not sure where we're going to be yet, but we'll take it from there. We'll let you know. And thank you everybody who's joined. And that's it from Explore Yorkshire. Do a bit of branding, trying to be better at that. And I will see you all very, very soon. So from Boston Spa, from Thorpe Arch on one side, Boston Spa on the other, this is John from Explore Yorkshire saying thank you for joining me. I hope to see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.